Welcome to another enlightening podcast from Be Awake, Aware, Alive.com, where we question everything. Why is there so much talk right now about people awakening? By the Be Awake, Aware, Alive.com team. Scroll through your social media feed, listen to a podcast, or eavesdrop on a conversation at a coffee shop, and you are likely to encounter it. The word awakening is everywhere. People are talking about spiritual awakenings, political awakenings, consciousness shifts, and waking up from the matrix. It is no longer the exclusive lexicon of monks on mountaintops or New Age retreats in Sedona. It has gone mainstream. But why right now? What is it about this specific moment in history, this precise convergence of years, that has so many people convinced they are rubbing the sleep from their eyes? The answer is not simple. It is not just about astrology or a passing trend. The sudden surge in awakening discourse is a direct, visceral reaction to the collapse of the foundational pillars that once held our reality together. The shattered mirror of normal. For generations, the Western world operated on a relatively stable social contract. Work hard, pay your taxes, consume media, trust the institutions, and life would proceed in a predictable, linear fashion. Then, the 2020s arrived like a freight train. The pandemic was the first global tremor that shook humanity out of its autopilot. For the first time in modern history, the entire planet pressed pause simultaneously. The machinery of daily life, commuting, office culture, mindless consumerism, ground to a halt. In that silence, people were left alone with their thoughts. Without the external noise, they began to hear the internal static. They asked, if the world stops, who am I? This was the primer. But the awakening wasn't confined to public health. It bled into geopolitics, economic instability, and climate anxiety. When the systems we rely on, governments, banks, healthcare, prove fragile, the illusion of safety shatters. An awakening occurs when the story you were told about reality no longer matches the reality you are experiencing. We are living in a time of extreme narrative dissonance, and that dissonance forces the mind to search for a new operating system. The death of the grand story. We are witnessing the death of the grand narrative. For centuries, we believed in the story of perpetual progress, that technology and capitalism would inevitably save us. We believed in the story of the American dream and its global equivalents. We believed in the absolute authority of legacy media and top-down hierarchies. Today, trust in these institutions is at an all-time low. When you stop believing the official story, you are forced to start investigating for yourself. This independent research, or doing your own homework, is the bedrock of the modern awakening. It is no longer just about spiritual enlightenment. It is about epistemological rebellion. People are awakening to the realization that information has been curated, and they are desperately trying to piece together a more authentic picture of reality using the mosaic of the internet. The digital spice rack and the overload crisis. Ironically, the very technology that distracts us is also the engine of our awakening. We live in an age of unprecedented information access. Ancient texts, suppressed histories, quantum physics theories, and esoteric philosophies are available at our fingertips. However, this is a double-edged sword. Human brains are not equipped to process the sheer volume of information we are subjected to daily. The result is a cognitive overload, a dark night of the soul on a global scale. When the brain is overwhelmed, it seeks patterns. It seeks meaning. The awakening narrative provides a framework for chaos. It gives a name to the anxiety. I am waking up to the truth. It transforms existential dread into a heroic journey. This narrative structure, the hero's journey, is deeply ingrained in our psyche. The chaos we are experiencing feels like the belly of the whale, and the awakening is the promise of eventual resurrection. The shift from having to being. The modern consumerist identity is failing. For decades, we were taught that we are our possessions, our jobs, and our social media profiles. But the pandemic and the rise of remote work blurred the lines between home and office, stripping work of its social identity. As a result, millions of people are experiencing a fundamental shift from the paradigm of having to the paradigm of being. They are asking existential questions. Why am I here? What is my purpose? This is the hallmark of a spiritual awakening, but it is happening within the secular, burnout-ridden workforce. The Great Resignation and quiet quitting were not just economic shifts. They were spiritual awakenings dressed in office attire. People woke up to the realization that their time is finite and that the corporate ladder was often leaning against the wrong wall. The collective shadow. Carl Jung famously spoke of the shadow, the unconscious parts of ourselves we refuse to look at. A collective awakening often begins with a collective shadow projection. We are currently projecting our shadow onto the other side of the political aisle, the elites, and the establishment. But true awakening requires integration. The current hype around awakening is about recognizing that the enemy is often a mirror. We are talking about awakening so much because we are desperate to transcend the duality of us versus them. We are exhausted by the polarization. The talk of awakening is a collective cry for synthesis, a desire to move beyond the tribal instinct that threatens to tear the social fabric apart. The danger of the awakening brand. We must, however, approach this trend with a critical eye. If everyone is awake, who is actually sleeping? There is a risk that awakening has become a commodity, a status symbol. It can become a form of spiritual narcissism, where people use wokeness or consciousness as a shield to feel superior to others. True awakening is destabilizing, humbling, and often terrifying. It involves a loss of certainty, not a gain of dogmatic truth. If the talk of awakening feels too easy, too trendy, or too validating, it might not be an awakening at all. It might just be a rebranding of the ego. Conclusion: why now? We are talking about awakening right now because the world has become unrecognizable. The ground has shifted beneath our feet, and we are scrambling for solid ground. The old maps, political ideologies, economic models, religious dogmas are outdated. We are navigating a new terrain, and we need a new internal compass. The talk of awakening is the sound of humanity trying to reinvent itself in real time. It is the noise of a species realizing that the external world is a reflection of the internal one. It is the sound of a billion people looking in the mirror and asking, "What have I become, and what can I still be?" Whether this is a genuine evolutionary leap or just the cognitive dissonance of a civilization in decline remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: the conversation is happening because the silence of the old world is finally deafening. And in that silence, for better or worse, we are listening. Don't forget to sign up to our mailing list, follow our social channels, donate if you're able, and question everything, with more free blogs and life-changing books at beawakeawarealive.com. Thanks for listening to another enlightening podcast from beawakeawarealive.com, where we question everything.